right, ladies and gentlemen, we're in the Delaware Valley. Welcome to the McMenamin Wing Show here on WWDB Talk 860. We've got an outstanding show. We are here with our host, Tom Wing. How are you, sir?
You know, I'm feeling great. The weather's finally getting warmer.
Thank God.
I've been waiting since November.
I know. And I don't think this year that the, Punxsutawney Sam, I don't think he saw his shadow, so we're supposed to have a shorter winter, but we always get that, nice kiss off from the winter, okay? And so we're not out of it, but it sure does feel good, especially after the weekend that we just had with the rain, like mother of God. So
I thought we were going to be swimming to work on Monday.
Incredible. Just absolutely crazy, but definitely a beautiful day in the studio. Tom, our guest today is Sean Fulmer of Schatz, Steinberg Klayman. How you doing, Sean?
I'm good. How are you?
Fantastic. You're not a stranger to the broadcast. You've been here, I guess not recently, but you have been on one of the shows, and also we've had. This has almost been like the last month has almost been like Schatz, Steinberg Klayman. Month on WWDB. So welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. I heard that Steve and Phil earlier on the show or in the month. So
absolutely, and we had the whole crew. Definitely a nice real firm that does a fantastic job. You talk about personal injury and criminal law. So nice cross section of legal services that you provide. If you would, a little bit about yourself and add to that with the firm.
Yeah, sure. So again, Sean Fulmer, I've been doing this for about 13 years now. I've had the pleasure of working with Steve for the full 13 years between both firms. I handled cases all the way from the first phone call when someone's injured, car accident, dog bite, slip and fall, trip and fall, at retail store, sidewalk, street, whatever the issue may be. And it handled all the way up until a trial verdict. And it's a very long process. And most people, you see these advertisements and things, get a quick cash settlement now. And people don't understand that when you're going through the process, you really need someone that is going to be a guide through the whole time. And someone that's going to be available to walk you through each part of the process. And that's what I like to pride myself on. So.
And so I imagine, and workers' compensation, Tom, McMenamin Wing does is workers' compensation. I imagine that first meeting, okay, is when you're educating your client. Sean, when somebody walks in and they've been, if unfortunately they've been T-boned, you can imagine, first of all, if they've never had a situation, they're in pain, a lot's going on. You might think that they bought insurance, right? I mean, they should just be getting a check any day now, right?
Yeah, so people walk in assuming I got in a car accident, I'm getting a check, but that's not how it works all the time, because realistically you have to show what the injury is. And sometimes I can call an insurance company the next day and settle for a very nominal, very small amount, but then the person is left with an injury that lasts a lifetime and they're not compensated for it. So that's the big misnomer with all the ads right now on social media and TV. It's, you could settle your case quick, but are you really getting the value that a good personal injury attorney can get you going through the process of being evaluated, understanding what the injury is, and then presenting a real case to an insurance company? So
let's talk about the point of injury on both sides. Tom, if you would, before we start, remind our listeners a little bit, obviously, about yourself and the firm.
Sure. My name's Tom Wing. I'm a workers' comp lawyer. Our main office is in Jenkintown, Pennsylvania. We've just moved. I guess it'll be official Monday.
Really?
And then we got offices all over the state. So we help injured workers. We do a lot of work with personal injury lawyers like Sean, and we're not an assembly line. So that initial phone call, working the case all the way up until a decision or a settlement, that's how we operate in our office.
So let's talk about that initial phone call, setting expectations, okay? Let's and we're going to obviously get, put it together where the two of us would work together on a case because, like Tom said, you work with personal injury firms like Schatz, Steinberg, Klayman. But day one, first phone call, what is that like, setting expectations for somebody who, again, they've been working for this company for years. It's obvious they fell off the ladder. Okay, it's right there. Or they're driving for a living. Let's go with something like that. They're driving for a living. They clearly got T-boned. Okay, so there's no way anything can go wrong. But more importantly, that's sarcasm. What's that phone call like? Because they're going, well, I'm just waiting for my check as we speak.
Yeah, so setting the expectation is kind of twofold. One, setting the expectation of what the insurance company is likely to do, because you have to remember, just because you have a good employer doesn't mean the insurance company is going to do the right thing. So that's number one. And then number two is setting the expectation on the timeline. Now, an employer has 21 days to accept or deny liability for an injury, but it doesn't mean they're going to follow the rules. So you may be waiting a little while for that check.
And in fact, certainly having all that knowledge and somebody walking in, when you're explaining the ebbs and flows, okay, maybe this accident didn't happen just last week. Maybe it happened and they're in your office because they just found out that, they're supposed to get an answer within 21 days. Maybe it's 2 to 3 months later and they're being toyed with.
Yeah, I mean, we see it all the time. They'll get a denial in the mail a month or two after the injury, after they've been strung along by an insurance carrier. And so that initial call or that initial meeting is definitely going to be a real sit down, get an understanding of the case, understand where they sit in their claim. And the further back the injury is from where we are today, that conversation can be a little bit lengthy, just getting an understanding on where we need to go in the claim and making sure the client understands.
Okay, so what should somebody not do?
They should not wait 30 days or whatever before talking to a lawyer, and they should definitely report the injury right away.
Okay, and so having said that, so what they should not do is they should not wait. I mean, a lot of people do want to wait to see how they feel a couple of days. They've been working for their employer for a long time, so...
Don't tough it out.
Right, don't tough it out. Exactly, because you're not always dealing with the employer, right? Sometimes an employer, I've heard stories where an employer, actually the owner of the company, witnessed the injury.
Oh, yeah. You have to remember the insurance company is in the driver's seat. It's not usually the employer making the decisions about the claim. It's an insurance company. You're a claim number to them. Get checked out, document the injury.
How many times have you heard this one, though? And of course not, most legitimate employers are not like this, but you may have somebody, and certainly there's a lot, don't tell them that it happened in work. Say it happened at home.
I see it all the time, particularly in the trades. So if you are on a big job site, you have a big general contractor, and then you got Joe's Roofing Company, and he's only a couple guys and a name on the side of a truck, and maybe he doesn't have workers' comp insurance. So something serious happens. First thing Joe's going to say to his guy.
Can we just make it Sean's insurance company? Roofing company.
We don't want to get Sean in trouble.
Well, we'll get. Oh, go ahead.
But when these employers aren't insured, it can create some problems for them because while there is a fund that will pay those uninsured claims, that fund is going to sue that uninsured employer to get back every dollar that they pay on that claim.
But even so, even if they have insurance, some people they're concerned more about their insurance rates than they are the injured worker.
Oh, it certainly happens. I see, probably once a week, an employer doesn't document an injury, doesn't fill out an incident report, doesn't really do any of what they're supposed to do, and they just ignore the problem and think it's going to go away. And certainly when the person calls my office, that problem's not going away.
Okay. So what happens if before they call your office, they listen to their buddy, okay, and they made up a story? And I'm sure this is a scenario that is quite, normal, okay, unfortunately. Somebody says, they felt, so they're working for a roofing company. They're carrying out, sometimes they carry big ladders straight up, okay, and all of a sudden, that thing cuts loose. They go down, they fall down, they get injured. But it doesn't seem like they don't have a break or anything like that. But they're in pain, and somebody on the job says to them, "Don't tell them it happened here. Let's just say it happened at home." What happens if they actually do that? Or what can happen?
Well, it's going to create problems in the claim because now once an ER record or an urgent care record says, oh, this happened at home, that's going to be the excuse for the carrier to deny the claim. And they'll deny it even past when there's surveillance evidence or other things that show that this injury clearly happened at work. Then they're just going to use it to attack the injured worker's credibility. So the best rule of thumb is just tell the truth.
If you're lying about that just to do somebody a favor and you find out that you're more injured than you thought you were. And that's when the key, and that's when you really have, I mean, number one, I had a guy call me one time and say, listen, I worked for a contractor only for 2 weeks. Okay, he's a union worker, didn't want to cause waves, quote unquote waves. And I'm not a lawyer. We have obviously we have an advocacy program, but I do know enough, from talking to individuals like yourself, not to lie. Okay, I can give that advice to any human being out there. I'm giving it to you now. Okay, because he didn't know how hurt he was. Eventually, I just said to him, "Hey, buddy, listen. He only worked for the company for 2 weeks. He didn't have to worry about a long-term job. He was working out of the union hall. What negative things can happen to you if you try to do something like that, and then you're pinning it on you're now pinning the insurance case on your personal insurance company? Is that fraud or
I would be surprised if someone got in trouble for insurance fraud for that. Maybe there's an element of that with their personal health insurer, but it's going to create credibility problems at a minimum.
Could eventually your personal insurance company say we're denying this because it happened in work, and now the work, your work insurance company is going, well, it didn't happen in work. We know they're lying. Could that cause that type of a confusion?
It can.
So my experience has been the health insurance will then require the workers' comp insurance to make a denial in writing, and then it creates a lot of litigation between the two insurers, and then the injured party is stuck here with a medical bill balance that's going to get levied against their credit because they're not making a payment. Health insurance isn't making a payment. Workers' comp isn't making a payment. And they're all fighting over who should really pay it only because the injured worker didn't say this happened at work like it really happened.
Right.
And another part of this that complicates it a whole lot more is a lot of these health insurers are regulated not by state law, but by federal law. So if you want to enforce those contractual obligations, you're not going in workers' comp court to do that. So you're fighting a two-front war. You're fighting them in workers' comp court and state court in Pennsylvania. And then you got to go into federal court and fight with the health insurer. And a lot of times that doesn't happen. It happens the way Sean has described. It just sits on somebody's credit until someone pays that bill.
So to give our listener a little ID, you're listening to the McMenamin Wing Show here on WWDB Talk 860. Tom Wing, not Tom McMenamin. Tom Wing is our host. Sean Fulmer is our guest on the program. And we're talking about things that you probably shouldn't do. Not probably, that you shouldn't do at the point of an injury. We're going to get into a personal injury in a second. Having said that, okay, you're putting yourself at risk when you do something. You're just trying to be a nice guy or a nice, because you don't know how injured you are. How often do you see when somebody when there's a work injury, personal injury, where somebody doesn't really realize, how injured they are, and a seemingly non-consequential injury turns into a catastrophic injury based upon having to get surgery. Eventually it doesn't heal because they didn't realize how injured they were at the point of injury.
Can happen all the time. I'm thinking just off the top of my head, I got a comment on a TikTok video I did recently where someone had a blood clot and it just kind of swelled up and it was sore and they didn't think anything of it. And 3 days later, they end up in the emergency room and it's much, much, much more serious. And that can happen with spinal injuries. It can happen with all different kinds of injuries. Not every injury is sort of what you see on TV. Somebody trips, falls, breaks their leg. It's obvious it's broken. If it's under the skin, sometimes it's very hard to see unless there are serious symptoms right away. And that's not always the case.
So let's ask Sean Fulmer, in your world, okay, somebody gets injured on the spot. Let's look at the same scenario, okay? A, what should they do? Okay, let's just say it's an auto accident, okay? Because they're the most common. What should they do at the point of injury? And then we'll go into what they shouldn't do.
So there's a lot of overlap with personal injury and workers' compensation, specifically the car accident that you're mentioning. If you're driving for a trucking company, there's a lot of ins and outs that you need to be aware of. So if you're working for a third-party trucking company who runs the trailer, who operates the truck that you're actually driving, whether it's you or someone else, whether the bill of sale or the bill of lading is really the one controlling your employment, these are all information that you want to gather right away and make sure that you have available for a personal injury attorney when you're talking to them, because it would be helpful for me to evaluate, do I need to refer them to a workers' compensation attorney to make sure that their medical bills are getting paid? Because when you're in a car accident, while in the course and scope of your employment, workers' compensation will take priority to pay your medical bills and wages before any auto insurance carrier does. And most people, again, going back to your scenario earlier where I don't want to get my job in trouble, I known the guy for 20 years, whatever the case may be. The problem is you end up having these medical bills that just remain unpaid by anybody. And you have to make the argument to the opposing insurance company that these bills should be paid, but you don't have the proof of the workers' compensation denial or health insurance denial. And these are all proofs that someone needs to make a personal injury claim. So, first, that's the information you want to have as to the status of operating the vehicle you're on the day of the accident. The other thing, too, is you don't want to leave a scene without taking pictures. You want to take pictures of where the cars are before they're moved, as long as it's safe to do so. So, obviously, if you're on 95 or the Boulevard or some other place, you don't want to be putting yourself in a position where you're going to get yourself injured further by taking photographs of where it is. The other thing, too, is you want to make sure that you take photographs of all the information that each person has that's involved, because there's no reason you can't take a picture of an ID, an insurance card, a license plate, whether it's a Zip car, Turbo car, Hertz rental, Enterprise rental. That's all important information to help identify who's really driving the vehicle that caused the accident. Now, in Philadelphia, unless you need a tow or an ambulance, most police officers aren't coming out.
Exactly.
And you need to document how and who was there, because I can't tell you how many times I've had someone say, I got rear-ended and the driver fled. Or I got rear-ended and the person said they wouldn't give me their driver's license, they'll only give me their owner's card. And at that point, too, sometimes you have to take a picture of the person so you can identify who was actually driving the car, because that can really affect what insurance coverage is going to apply. Because if you're renting a car, so Joe, let's say you rent a car, and I say, hey, look, can I just run to the store and can I?
What kind of car is it, John? I'm a man of style.
I gotta imagine it's Camaro.
Yeah,
I gotta
no
imagine
question.
it's Camaro.
Absolutely.
So, and you give me the car to run to the store, the rental car is not going to be covered while I'm driving it because I didn't rent it. And that's going to make a big difference in insurance coverage, because you may be on the hook because you gave me the car to drive and I caused an accident. And then I may be held liable personally as well, because there's no insurance that's going to cover me while I'm driving that car.
Yeah, no, you think about it. And when we're talking about this, so you mentioned several different things in there, because we're now talking about you're at work, okay? It's workers' compensation, okay? You're driving the car. But also you touched on auto insurance, okay? Especially if somebody takes off, okay? And when you're driving for a living, okay? Very interesting point, because you wonder, it depends who owns the car. Okay, if the company owns the car or if you own the car. Workers' compensation, Tom, is something that you're required in the city, in the state of Pennsylvania to have it, correct?
Oh, yeah.
What about auto insurance? Let's take two, so if I'm financing my car, I have to have it. They require me. But do you have to have, say you have we don't quite have that Camaro, and we have a secondhand vehicle, right? Do I actually have to have insurance? Is it the law that I need auto insurance?
So in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, you're required to have liability insurance.
Okay.
Otherwise, what happens is you'll default to what's called limited tort. So if you own a car and you don't have insurance, and you get rear-ended, you now have a hurdle that you have to jump in order to collect pain and suffering money. And it is a hurdle where you have to prove a serious injury. It doesn't have to be permanent, but serious. Whereas if you just buy your insurance like you're supposed to, you have a lot more options to cover yourself. And actually going into the work comp issue, I can't tell you how many times someone drives for Verizon, Comcast, a plumber, whomever, and they think, oh, my employer's got car insurance, they're going to cover me.
Yeah, I was just thinking that. Yeah,
and they're gonna cover me, but then lo and behold, they find out they don't have specific insurance to cover them if it's a hit and run or if it's enough insurance to cover them. And then they go to their personal insurance, and then the personal insurance is saying, well, you drive for your employer. We're not covering it because you never told us. And the problem is people don't realize that when you go to buy insurance, you can purchase all different kinds of coverage to protect yourself. And in Philadelphia, with the amount of people who either have the state minimum insurance of $15,000 or no insurance at all, the best way to really protect yourself is to buy insurance, is to make sure that you have what's called uninsured or underinsured motorist coverage.
And we're going to get into that conversation. It's really interesting, especially when you're driving for a living. You need workers' comp, if you're the employer.
Sure.
Okay. But I'm wondering, if you have a minimum policy, okay, that does affect it, right? In other words, if the employer has a minimum policy, okay, and it's a hit and run, okay, you may be covered. He or she may have, workers' comp. But how does that, I know that if it's, for example, if I'm driving, I get hit by a Jersey driver, I'm a PA driver, and I have limited tort, it turns into full tort, right?
That's right.
But are there any such regulations if it's a work injury? So in other words, does anything automatically turn into, there's so many idiosyncrasies, but if the employer, like you said, doesn't have a lot of coverage, okay, which is unbelievable. I can't even imagine it, but I'm assuming it happens. Is there anywhere where it kicks in, where the it turns into full tort or no?
So, going back to the example of Verizon or Comcast, if you're driving one of those types of vans, you're automatically deemed to be full tort because you're operating a commercial vehicle.
Okay. That's okay.
Right.
I'm nodding my head because a non-private passenger motor vehicle, I think, is the exception.
Okay. Could you imagine? And I'm being sarcastic. And if you were working for Verizon and they did not have insurance, I mean, of course those companies are going to have it, but it's the mom and pops that I would be concerned about.
Well, again, so it really depends on how they list the ownership of the vehicle. So if Tom's operating a roofing business and he's doing it Tom's Roofing, but it's not a real commercial or company, and the car is owned in Tom's name personally, you're not going to get the benefit of that full tort status of operating a non-private passenger vehicle.
Plus, you might get a disclaimer of coverage too.
That's true. Because
you're using the vehicle for a business and personal insurance.
Tom, what work injuries as you've covered them in every possible area? By the way, shout out to Roger McMenamin.
He's in Hazleton today.
He's in Hazleton.
Beautiful Hazleton.
The home of who? Who famous is from Hazleton? If you like baseball.
Today it's Roger.
Right. I love it. Exactly. So Joe Madden, the former Angels, was it who he managed for the Angels and who else?
The Cubs, the Rays, right?
Right, the Rays and the Cubs, right. So if they're standing next to each other, my first thing I'm thinking is, who's that guy standing next to Roger McMenamin?
That's right.
You're damn right.
It's because of WWDB, actually.
It is. You're damn right. It would be Joe Who. Heck with the World Series win. But Tom, in your world, most, so you see a lot of injured workers, people injured on the job, construction, I'm sure driving, auto, and all, and from every walk of life. Any particular area of work that you see more cases in than others? Construction, driving, maybe, policemen.
It depends on the area. So, okay. I mean, if you're more rural, you're going to see more warehouses. There are a lot of distribution centers for companies. driving is all over the state. I mean, certainly we got roads everywhere, right? So we see a lot of motor vehicle accidents, a lot of truck accidents. We do see a lot of construction, but that kind of ebbs and flows with the economy. You know, when building is booming, there are a lot more accidents. When there's less construction, there are fewer accidents.
But is it typically those two types of, and it's a great point you make, I'm sure, for when building is not booming, when construction is not booming, I guess auto, but is there any, are they basically, when things are good, when the economy is good, what do you see most of?
It's hard to say. I mean, so we cover the entire state, and as our listeners know, Pennsylvania is incredibly diverse. I mean, we have farming communities. We have areas that are very, very dense urban centers that are all professional kind of settings where you're going to an office tower or something like that. You have service sectors, you have labor work like warehouses, you have construction. So it's really, really regionally dependent.
That's a good point. Sean, let's go to what you shouldn't do at the point of an accident. And let's not even talk about a work accident. Let's just say it's an auto accident. You get hit. What are the things that somebody should know that they should not do at a your point of accident?
Never admit that you did something wrong at that point, because if I can't tell you how many times now I've had clients who try to explain to me that they recorded someone saying it was my fault, or take a audio recording, video recording without the other person's permission. Obviously, that's not allowed, but people still do it nowadays, especially with cell phones being so readily available. Realistically, you really just want to exchange information and then move on. If you need an ambulance, then ask for it or call for one. If you need a ride home, call that person. And you don't even necessarily want to be within earshot of the person who caused the accident, because you don't want them to hear what you're saying, because they can report to their insurance company, their lawyer, or whoever that so-and-so called their lawyer at the scene, so-and-so called their mom at the scene, their dad, or someone that they trusted to try to give them guidance as to how to respond to the accident itself.
You would imagine that making any statements, for example, I've heard many times that, and Tom, I'm sure in your world also, where somebody doesn't, how you feeling? You're on the phone, even if it's the next day, how you feeling? And the answer is, I feel okay, that can be, used against somebody, correct?
Yes, and it can be really, really troubling, because someone will say, I feel fine at that moment, and they just mean literally at that moment in time, but they don't specify it. So with these recorded statements, the only thing you get is someone saying, I feel fine. And then you hear that the person either went to the ER, a doctor, or someone else to get evaluated for further injury. And people can't appreciate the idea that, well, pain sometimes just, as Tom was saying earlier, just gradually comes and gets worse over time. I mean, these are forceful injuries, whether it's a car accident, whether you're tripping on a sidewalk or in a street. It contorts your body and causes a lot of stress that your body may not even be used to. And that pain may not even really show up for at least 1 to 3 days after.
So if you're in Philadelphia and it's not a seemingly catastrophic injury, even though my wife has a scar across her neck from a fender bender that we got when we were kids, 18, 19 years old. Somebody hit us at the light, and she had, she was fine. Like we were fine, we thought. But she had continually, I think it started a couple weeks later, a pinched nerve. Then it continued, and eventually the disc exploded to the point where it was it was well over a year later. But so she clearly didn't know. But if it's a seemingly insignificant accident, it seems like a little fender bender, but like what happened to us, that turned out to be a catastrophic injury she had. And the police don't come, and we're in Philadelphia. Should you go and file a police report at the district?
So you actually have 3 days from the day of the accident to file a police report. So you should actually go and report it yourself. You can go to the district yourself and actually take the information. That's why it's important for you to take photos of driver's license, insurance cards, and license plates, because the officer at the desk who will be making the report is going to ask you, what proof do you have of this accident? So if you can.
What if you don't go in 3 days? What happens?
You can't make one in Philadelphia.
Okay.
So you have 3 days from the date of the accident to actually make it.
That's incredible. And does that hurt your case?
It can. I mean, the police report will be one-sided, most likely, if you do that, versus if you go with the person that actually was involved in the accident too. But it's helpful because you're swearing to the police that this is what happened and this is what you're reporting as the details of the accident.
It can slow things down too without a police report, because you have to understand a lot of these insurance adjusters are not in Pennsylvania. They don't know how Philly works. And so they're on the phone with, the lawyer's office going, well, where's the police report? I'm not paying anything till I have a police report. Like, you talk to any lawyer in Philadelphia, you just say, oh, it's a Philadelphia case. Oh, and that's the end of the conversation.
So I imagine a lot of people don't have them because they don't know that they got to be there within 3 days, correct?
Yes, most people have no idea because, like Tom was saying earlier, sometimes these injuries don't manifest, come out for a week or two. And by the time that happens, you're out of the police report window. And that's why it's really important that when an accident happens, the day the accident happens, if you're feeling any type of pain, problems, issues, your first thing should be to seek any medical treatment if it's emergent. And then after that, make the police report. And then after that, contact a lawyer before you contact any insurance company. Because anytime you speak to the insurance company, they're going to try to record what you're telling them. And the issue is sometimes the insurance company calls you off guard because they call you from some foreign number after you first report the accident. And you have this adjuster who's trying to get a new statement from you. And you're either at work, dealing with kids, just wake up, whatever the case may be. And now they're going to use that information against you later on the claim because you were just caught off guard when the insurance company called you. And that's why the benefit of having a lawyer, you create that buffer. The insurance company is not going to bother you with that.
Well, and educating people, which is what we're doing right now, okay? Educating people on the need to get counsel, okay? Before you, what people don't understand is insurance companies already have their protocols, okay? You purchased insurance so you could be protected, but at the same time, having somebody walk you through the process. How much does it cost to retain or just even get your consultation?
So I always make the joke with people that I only get paid if you get paid, right? So I always make the joke that if you call me one time or you call me a million times, I get paid the same percentage. So take advantage of me as a way to try to walk you through and explain the process. That's why I really feel it's beneficial at the first call to set that expectation of, hey, this is how it's going to be. This is how it's going to work. If you have questions along the way, that's fine. Ask them. Don't ask a friend. Don't ask a family member because everyone goes through a situation differently. And each process, each insurance company is different. And like you said, each insurance company, they have their protocol. They're checking boxes every time they call you. And all they're trying to do is get whatever information they can to hurt your claim because they want to pay you as little as possible.
As attorneys, especially when you were young and coming up, okay, how do you in a sense, I'm assuming it's you have great partners and great mentors as you grow, but your first time you're on I talk about when you're on one of those calls, okay, with a client, and the insurance company's asking questions, okay. At what point do you jump in? Okay, what are red flag questions? You understand what their motives are, but when you were younger, I'm wondering also what that was like when you first started getting involved in those conversations and representation of your client.
I think when I was first doing this and the first call was really alarming to me because you deal with people with so many different emotions. People are angry, they're upset, frustrated, they're lost, they don't know what to do.
They probably want to talk a lot, right?
They want to explain everything about what happened to them, which you have to listen to because sometimes people don't understand that when you ask a question for specific information, the person's not giving you all the information. So you have to listen to somebody because when you listen to somebody, they may accidentally give you that information that you're really looking for to evaluate a case and see if you can help somebody.
Tom, talk about a similar, situation.
Yeah, I was sitting here nodding my head as Sean was talking. One of the things that we stress in our office is the same lawyer is on the case from start to finish. And one of the reasons we do that is that conversation, that initial conversation, really even subsequent conversations. If you're on the phone with that client or you're meeting with that client, they're going to tell you things that they didn't think were important that turn out to be huge in the case. And I have so many examples of where the client just says something offhand, oh, and the doctor mentioned this to me, and it just blows the case wide open. And you have to understand you're dealing with people who are not sophisticated users of legal services. These are hardworking people who they're not out to get rich on this. They just want to get better. And they just want to get the benefits that they are entitled to and get back to work. So
let's do this. Let's take a quick break. We are going to have more from the McMenamin Wing Show in just a minute. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the McMenamin Wing Show here on WWDB Talk 860. Tom Wing's guest is Sean Fulmer of Schatz, Steinberg, and Klayman. We're going to get into a little bit of when the cases overlap. Okay, let's look at a scenario, Tom. I'm not going to say a typical scenario because everyone's different, but somebody drives for a living. They get nailed in a. How about we try something like this? How about a trucking accident? Okay, where there's a potential somebody's driving for a living. They work for somebody else. Okay, they may be a teamster, but they don't own the truck. They're working for, let's just say, Pepsi or someplace where they don't own their vehicle. And that might, by the way, that may not be true, but let's just take an example. Somebody gets catastrophically injured in a trucking accident. They're working for a living, and you realize because there could be a lot of factors in a trucking accident. Okay, and a lot of individuals could be a lot of negligent parties.
Sure.
So somebody just came in to your office, and chances are maybe it's a family member. Their loved one's in the hospital. Talk about you're looking at the case number one, and then you realize there's a third party element in it.
Yeah, you just kind of beat me to it. So that initial screening when we're talking to a client or a family member is gathering information. We want to know as much about that incident and the different players as we can. And then part of that is issue spotting. So we want to see, was there a problem with the truck? Did the brakes fail? Whose job was it to maintain them? Was it a rear end accident? Did they hit something? It's really identifying those other issues and potentially other negligent parties in addition to the workers' compensation claim, because I can get their wage loss and their medical bills paid, while they wait for that third-party case, but I can't compensate them for their pain and suffering. So then we bring in somebody like Sean, who's going to go out and really dig into those other negligent parties and get all the extra compensation.
And we would be looking at, in the trucking accident, was it a brake issue? Was it a tire issue? Was there a roadway issue where, let's say, it was a pothole causing a tire to blow out? Was a traffic light not working? Was there a stop sign where there should have been a stop sign? Whatever the case may be, or was the person that caused the accident just on their phone or GPS or some other distraction?
Okay, so I remember I did the first show on trucking about a year and a half, 2 years ago, and I was blown away at how many different potential negligent parties there could be. So let's just nix the Pepsi or Coke conversation. The individual working for a trucking company, he's working. They go to a yard to pick up a load of equipment or steel. Okay, how many negligent parties? Say the fault. They're driving on 95, and all of a sudden that load was put on there wrong. Okay, and man, I can't stress enough, especially doing these shows. I cannot, especially since we've had these conversations, I cannot stress enough to stay away from a big load while you're driving. Don't get next to it. Get around it as soon as you possibly can, because it could go off so many different ways. If that individual's driving that load and that load was loaded wrong, okay, and it causes the vehicle, to capsize or something like that. And it's not somebody who just drove through a light and hit them. Is there still a negligent party? And in other words, can that individual, is that third party is suable as much as if it was somebody who T-boned them?
So it's funny you bring this up. my law school exam was essentially the Final Destination movie where the truck and the rope failed and the load starts falling off the back of the tractor trailer, right? And
I should have went to law school. Okay, couldn't get through community college, but that's another story.
It was every moment of it was as riveting as Sean described. Let me tell you.
We just want to do it again and again all the time.
Oh yeah, absolutely, right.
But when you have that type of issue, the person loading it, do they distribute the weight properly? The person loading it, are they a staffer or are they an employee of the warehouse? Is there a distribution company? Is there a parent company? Is there a safety company that provides a site plan or direction as to how the load's supposed to be distributed on the trailer? The trailer itself, if the trailer fails, if there's bands around the trailer, who was putting the bands on, whether or not the band actually failed itself. There's so many different aspects that could play a part in that. And that's why, again, assuming that the person's able to gather this information, or if a family member responds to the scene, take pictures, gather whatever information you can, because that information, those photos at the scene can really help narrow down what caused the person to get injured in that trucking accident.
Tom, you just got this on your desk. You, being a professional, you look at this and in your sleep, you know, obviously there's a third party.
Yeah.
Family doesn't know. You talk about, obviously, making that call, all right? And Sean, what is the process here? Because at this point, you have a lot of investigating to do, and I'm assuming, Sean, and I'm talking to Sean, you're holding the fort down in regards to the workers' comp. Where does this thing, where does it, the rubber meet the road when it comes to the two of you working together and making sure that this is airtight?
Sure. So the first step, you kind of hinted at it, is I'm kind of holding the fort down. The case walks into my office and, we kind of triage it, make sure the injured worker's getting the appropriate medical care. We try to identify the parties, and then we kick out preservation letters. Because what you have to understand is this family is dealing with a catastrophic injury, trying to, bring in another lawyer and try to, send people out to do investigating.
So you're going to do some of the legwork.
So we're going to try to get as much of that legwork done as possible so that once Sean is up to speed, and because it may be even a couple days of delay can be catastrophic. Sometimes surveillance footage, like at a warehouse or something, that could be overwritten in 72 hours. So that letter, as soon as that case walks in the door, preservation letters go out to say to these potential defendants, hey, we have a potential claim here. We are putting you on notice. We want everything. Preserve all the evidence. Preserve the truck. Don't touch it. And so that way, when Sean steps in, meets with the family, understands and identifies these defendants, everything is there.
And now you get the case, Sean. And as much as we would like to get this, obviously, to protect the individuals within 72 hours, let's just say Tom did not get this case because typically speaking, and it's not out of the ordinary, somebody could, try to do the legwork themselves, right? Like and maybe not even think about, filing a case or whatever just right away. Because right now they're beat up. 3 days is one thing, but it may take a couple of weeks to just get their bearings and see what's wrong with their loved one, all these different things. And now finally...
usually I get the call from the spouse who's wondering how they're going to pay the mortgage. That's the timeline. It's usually the guy's in the hospital and we're 2 weeks out from the injury and the spouse is calling me saying, workers' comp hasn't called me. Yeah. How am I supposed to pay my mortgage?
Okay. And that is exactly what I'm saying. They realize now that their loved one is not going to be back to work in a week. Okay. They waited as long as they could. The 2 weeks is going now. They're not getting it. They maybe been promised. But now you get the call from Tom Wing or Roger McMenamin. Where do you go? Because you're 2 to 3 weeks out here. It's a trucking accident. Now you got the call.
So the nice thing about Tom's and the preservation letters, it's its starting off point. So he may have found some companies or possible parties that are related, but then what we can do is we can check dockets. We can see where these people have also been sued. We can also, if it's 2 to 3 weeks out, most likely going to get a police report, assuming there's no investigation for either a death, a homicide, or DUI or some other criminal activity. And then the other thing too is with these accidents, you can actually go out to the scene. We had a case recently where the person was injured on 95, and what ended up happening was the construction crew have these cameras now monitoring construction zones for their safety.
Sure.
Ironically, it caught the accident on the scene. So again, as long as you have that kind of information out there, you can then explore what other avenues, what other evidence you can find. But to Tom's point, without that information ahead of time, it becomes very difficult to go out and find it, look for it. And that's why those photos, details of the accident, all that information is so important at the very beginning.
Tom, when you get this type of case, the importance of that workers' compensation to be able to sustain them, Sean, these cases can take some time.
So in my experience, the workers' compensation is monumental to the person surviving the process, because the issue that you run into is someone's not working, like Tom said, trying to figure out how to pay mortgage, bills, groceries, everything, right? And my case, the third-party action will take some time. Sometimes it takes 6 months, 12 months, 2 years, depends on how heavily litigated these cases are. And the more serious of an injury and the more complicated the liability theory is, the longer these cases take.
How do you deal with so when I talk about a trucking accident, and we know auto accidents are slip and fall, for crying out loud, or any type of, there's a number of different personal injury areas. But when it's a catastrophic situation, how do you prepare yourself? You guys seem like, nice personable guys, but man, somebody walks in and they got a loved one who's, and I don't know how many people would have the stomach for that. You can get through one or two, but now you've walking in, it's the wife that just came in. Okay. Now it's not wrongful death, but it's a catastrophic type situation. How do you have that conversation with them? Okay. Keep it together, number one. And number two, go through the ebbs and flows of this process, like you said, Sean, that could take, a year, 2 years to come to fruition.
I think the biggest thing, I'm sure Tom will agree with this, is just being empathetic to the person and just appreciating what that person's going through. And the fact of going through this so many times, you kind of learn how to better respond to somebody's body cues as to, if this person's angry, you want to respond in a different way than if the person's just sobbing uncontrollably, because you get both ends of the spectrum and you have to address the person and you want to make them feel like you're helping them the best you can. You don't want that person to think you're just another call from a billboard or whatever.
Yeah,
I would agree. And what you have to understand, Joe, is these people are coming to us asking for help. They don't know this system, and they may never know this system ever again. It's our job to guide them through this system.
So having said that, what about cooperation? Okay, you're representing the family, okay? But now you have to go and get the evidence, okay? And what, and of course they're going to spin it like you're just out there, another personal injury attorney, right? Trying to get, but what they don't, and that's a nice spin. It's a beautiful spin, totally inaccurate, but a nice spin. Okay, you're representing somebody who's been negligently injured, who may never ever walk or work again. Okay, and by the way, you may be the individual that is a difference between poverty for the rest of this family's life. Okay. Having said that, I'm going to take a shot at this one, but maybe you don't get the, the empathy back, okay, from, a construction site. Maybe not even the construction workers, because they're not connecting the dots. You're there for their buddy who just got catastrophically injured, or maybe they don't even know that individual, okay? When you're investigating a case, okay, what is the cooperation level? And what sometimes are the roadblocks?
Well, it's funny because when you have a case where someone's injured on a job site or while they're at work, the employer has, after their insurance pays out money, they have the right to get their money back from the third party case. And it's nice to excel or exercise a power move to the employer saying, if you want your money back, you have to help us. And if you don't, then you can't claim as much as you're trying to. And because it's an equitable or a fair standpoint, that they're going to have a lot more information. People on the job site, witnesses, employee logs, OSHA, JSAs, job safety analysis reports, all these different things that an employer is going to have immediate access to that could help us really investigate the third-party claim.
Okay, and Tom, I know you've never heard of this. That's called subrogation.
It is. It is. I was sitting here nodding, like, I could say subrogation. That's my contribution.
No, but that is that an interest? Like, that's an interesting. It's like interesting bedfellows. Like, right. In other words, like now all of a sudden, you have a situation where the workers' compensation insurance company has a vested interest in obviously supporting the claim. So that they can get their money back, because if it was somebody else's fault, and if it wasn't their fault, then there would have been no accident, and they wouldn't have to pay workers' comp insurance.
Sure, subrogation basically just means workers' comp becomes an injured party in that third party action. They paid under a no fault policy, and they get their money back, just like the injured person has their damages.
So is there now a relationship that is...
Yeah, I do find that when there's a subrogation interest, they're a little bit more cooperative in discovery when they're turning over documents.
Hey, buddy, how you doing?
We get those MSDS sheets a lot faster.
Okay. Talk about one of the things listeners and, clients across the planet, the big, hit on attorneys is communication. Successful attorneys like yourself is a priority, okay? And I often say that the fact is that you could be number one in your law class, but if you don't have social skills or personal skills, you're not going to be the old tree in the middle of the woods that if it falls, does it make a sound if no one's there? Well, you could be the smartest guy in the room, but if you don't know how to treat your clients, you're not going to have many of them. Let's take it up a notch. How important is it for the work comp and the personal injury attorney to be able to communicate and in a case like this, because there may be a lot of factors between, and where is it really crucial where these cases impact each other?
Sure. So I'll steal it first. So one of the biggest ways I see third-party claims screwed up is when someone who doesn't understand workers' comp settles the workers' comp case. And you can inadvertently admit things in the third-party claim in a workers' comp settlement if you're not careful. So we do talk to each other a lot, particularly around medical care or liability issues or obtaining evidence. Sometimes it's easier for me to get some of the evidence pre-suit. Because remember, we have the power of the subpoena maybe 45 days, 90 days into this claim. Sean's not going to have it maybe 6 months to a year. So we can get a lot of information very quickly, and having that open line of communication is going to be really important to make sure they have the right targets, they have the right evidence, and everything's lined up.
In your world?
And it's really important because Tom will let me know when a client's being deposed, and then I can advise the client, hey, you need to give the information regarding how your injury occurred, but you don't need to go into every little detail because, like Tom said, if they go into too much, the liability attorney will take that and flip it and either try to say they're comparatively or they're proportionally at fault, or they didn't watch where they were going, or they didn't take care of themselves, or the other party's not at fault because they told the workers' comp attorney in Tom's case that I don't remember how the accident happened. I don't remember how I got injured.
So the two of you are communicating, okay, I guess on a regular.
You have to.
It's just as important for the professionals to be communicating as on issues like medical.
Yes.
You talk about that. And of course, what case typically settles first? Workers' comp?
Usually it's workers' comp. I mean, the life cycle of a workers' comp claim is somewhere in the neighborhood of 9 to 12 months, whereas a liability claim, year to 3 years, something like that.
Sean, contact information for you at the firm?
So Sean Fulmer at Schatz, Steinberg Klayman, phone number 215-845-0250. And we have an office in Center City and New Jersey.
Tom Wing?
Tom Wing, McMenamin Wing, head office here in Jenkintown. Give me a follow on TikTok at THWESQ.
Boom. I want to thank everybody for tuning in to the McMenamin Wing Show here on WWDB Talk 860. Shout out to Tyler, our producer. I want to thank Sean Fulmer for being on our program. On behalf of our host, Tom Wing, Roger McMenamin, and Sean Fulmer, thanks for joining us, everybody.